Hey, this is Dirtbike with FixtureJohn.com, and this is how to rebuild the forks on your 1998 through 2001 Yamaha YZ125. Parts and tools are in the description as always. This service is for a 1998 through 2001 model year. If I find a 94 through 97 bike, I'll do those too. When removing the forks, loosen the fork cap while the bottom pinch bolts are still tight. During disassembly, you must fit a wrench under the spring. It is an absolute bastard and you're going to see me struggle with it, but put the fork up against a wall or something solid, put all your weight into that spring, push it back, and then install the wrench. In this video, you will see me using an impact driver. It is perfectly safe to use power tools when servicing forks. You just cannot be a moron while you do it. You will need the standard fork rebuild tool set and an extra damper removal tool, which you can get in the link below. Do not try to DIY this tool. You will waste so much time. Ask me how I know. Clean your bike before you start. Don't screw yourself from the jump by being lazy. Loosen the fork cap air screw to release air from the fork tube. Turn your rebound adjuster out so it is at its softest setting. Do the same with the compression clicker. Hold your fork over a catch pan and unscrew the fork cap. Hold the fork spring down with one hand and fit your 17mm wrench on the piston rod lock nut. This is the one I was talking about. Hold your wrench and remove the fork cap with your 18mm socket. Remove the fork cap, cushion, washer, and spacer as a single assembly. Remove the push rod from the cartridge. Remove the spring. Unscrew the nut from the damper rod cartridge, then remove the spring guide. To remove the compression valve, bottom out the outer fork tube and clamp the axle holder in a vise with a towel. Push the piston rod into the cartridge until it stops. Insert your cartridge rod holder in the fork tube and lock it to the top of the cartridge housing. Hold the damper rod holder and loosen the compression valve with your 14mm socket. Remove the compression valve and the gasket. Remove the damper rod and pump it until dry. Do the same with the fork tubes. Carefully pry the dust seal out of the tube. Carefully pry out the stopper ring. Hold your fork and slowly move the tube in and out. If it's anything but smooth, you may have some gouges or deformation to address. Hold the outer fork and knock the inner fork against the bushing to separate the tubes. Remove the guide bushing, backup ring, oil seal, stopper ring, and dust seal. Remove all the bushings and O-rings, then clean everything nice and deep-like. Make sure to remove any leftover thread lock and that all the orifices are clear of debris. When inspecting the fork, minor scrapes can be removed with a 600 grit sandpaper. Anything more significant will require replacing the tube. Inspect the axle holder, file down any burrs, and lightly smooth the bore with sandpaper. Check the compression valve inner bore diameter for anything that can damage the O-rings. Remove any rough spots. Inspect the outer fork tube for damage. Inspect the cap threads, oil seal bore, and stop ring groove. Inspect the damper rod assembly. Check for cracks or deformation. Make sure the oil control holes are clear. Check the bottom threads. Measure the fork spring free length. Replace both springs if one or both is beyond the service limit of 17.9 inches or 455 millimeters. Inspect the compression valve. During assembly, ensure every fork component is nice and lubed up with the same fork oil you're going to use in the Fork Maxima. Install the damper rod cartridge assembly into the fork slider. Make sure it seats correctly at the base. Install the new gasket and 2 new O-rings. Insert the rod holder into the fork tube and lock it to the top of the cartridge body. Double check that the bottom end of the cartridge is still seated in the slider bore. Apply thread lock to the compression valve threads, not letting thread locker touch the O-rings. Hold the rod holder and thread the compression valve onto the damper rod cartridge. Keep holding the holder and tighten the compression valve with your 14mm socket. Torque the compression valve to 41 foot-pounds. Install the spring guide with the notches facing up. Install the nut with the threaded end pointing up. Tighten the nut finger tight. Cover the end of the fork slider with plastic wrap and lubricate it with fork oil. Install the dust seal with the closed side facing towards the axle holder. Install the stopper ring. Install the oil seal with the closed side facing the axle holder. Install the backup ring, then install the guide bushing. Remove the plastic. Lubricate and install the fork bushing. Then insert the slider into the fork tube. Install the bushing. Seat the bushing between the fork tube and slider. Seat the washer against the bushing. Using your fork seal driver, seat the bushing into the fork tube. You will hear a noticeable change when the bushing is seated. Pack the dust and oil seal with high pressure grease. Install the oil seal. Drive the oil seal into the fork tube with your seal driver. It is seated when you can see the stopper ring groove. Install the stopper ring. Make sure it is seated completely into the groove. Install the dust seal. Slide the fork tube several times to check for binding. Mount the axle holder vertically in a vise with a towel. Fill your fork with Kayaba 01 or equivalent fork oil. Maxima! Buy Maxima. Slowly pump the piston rod up and down about 15 times. Keep topping off your oil as you bleed. Pump the fork tube up and down about 15 times to purge any trapped air between the fork tube and slider. Don't extend the fork past 200 millimeters. Air will enter the oil and you will need to repeat this step. Leave your fork for at least 10 minutes to let air surface. With your fork assembly compressed, measure the oil level with your oil level gauge. Adjust the oil level between 80 millimeters and 150 millimeters. Slowly pull the piston rod up. Using your calipers, ensure the lock nut is 20 millimeters from the end of the rod. Slowly install the push rod. Install the spring with the small coil end down. Install the cushion, washer, and spacer into the fork cap. Double check that the rebound clicker is turned all the way out. Pull the spring down and install the fork cap finger tight. Hold the lock nut with your 17mm wrench and torque the fork cap to 21 foot-pounds. Double check the fork cap O-rings and thread the fork cap into the fork tube. Install your fork in the fork bridge and tighten the bottom pinch bolts only. Torque the fork cap to 22 foot-pounds. Loosen the bottom pinch bolts so they are loose, but still hold your fork. Turn your fork so the air screw faces forward. Set the top of your fork 5 millimeters above the top of the upper fork bridge. Torque the lower fork bridge pinch bolts 15 foot-pounds. Torque the upper fork bridge pinch bolts to 17 foot-pounds. This fork rebuild can take some time, so do not do it if you are in a hurry. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.